Hello, welcome to Jewish Museum Milwaukee's Museum Moments. My name is Ellie Gettinger, and I'm the Education Director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee. I hope you all are doing well today. So we are exploring Greenbelt Cities. And Greenbelt Cities are kind of this strange concept that comes out of the New Deal programs. And we're going to be taking an actual physical field trip to one of the three Greenbelt cities in the U.S. at the end of the run of Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? So today we thought, what might be fun is having some time to really explore what the evolution of those were in preparation for our field trip to Greendale on September 5th. So let's jump in and give you a sense of the evolution of this movement. So right now, as many of you know, our special exhibit at the moment is Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? Jewish Artists of the WPA. And as we started planning for this exhibit, we really wanted to think about what are the many ways in which the New Deal affected people throughout Milwaukee, throughout the country, and what were the kinds of lesser known projects that came out of the New Deal. And I'm not sure that this is a lesser known one, but I think it's in some ways a forgotten project of the New Deal. And it certainly was one of the more controversial projects. So as we think about the broad New Deal, we often think about this in terms of the alphabet soup of the New Deal, the CCC, the WPA, the TVA. And these are kind of the big projects that many, many people know to that. I'm going to add a new set of initials, the RA, to the mix, the Resettlement Administration. And this is a group that was founded under the auspices of dealing with the huge amounts of people who had been, who are now on unproductive farms or who had lost housing. So it was something about this bigger project was looking at how we accommodate people in housing in productive parts of the country and make sure that there's work nearby and all of these things. And it was at no point in its, short life was it not seen as a controversial piece of this New Deal puzzle. As we're looking at this, the kind of leader of the Resettlement Administration was a guy named Rexford G. Tugwell. And Tugwell was born in upstate New York. He had been born in kind of an agricultural setting. He saw what farm life was like, but he'd also studied and had become a PhD. He was working at Columbia, and he became part of FDR's Brain Trust. And he was really inspired by the garden movement that came out of England in the late 1800s. And this was in response to the kind of crazy growth of cities out of the Industrial Revolution. There's this sense that instead of just having growth upon growth upon growth, that there should be a planned development, that things should be created for purposeful living, and that you should create these communities just outside of cities that provide comfortable spaces for people to live with easy access to the city where jobs are. The leader of this movement in England was a guy named Ebenezer Howard. And to this point in the US, there had been two communities that had been before the Depression that had been built with the same kind of mentality: Forest Hills, New York, and Radburn, New Jersey. In both cases, you had kind of very progressive capitalists who decided that this is going to be a better way to engage their workforce and to create kind of these purposeful communities. Tugwell is very much in the place of seeing what government can do to enable better life. And he says, this is in a number of places, that his idea is to go just outside the centers of population, pick up cheap land, build a whole community, entice people into it, then go back into the cities and tear down whole slums and make parks of them. So he really has this sense that cities aren't functioning, that the way housing works in cities doesn't function, and that he wants to turn this upside down and create these purposeful communities. Again, this is one piece of the puzzle for the Resettlement Administration, but it's a pretty big widely publicized piece of that. Initially, their goal is to, have 25 of these communities. They vet 100 different cities all over the country. And in the end, between the controversy, which we'll address later, and just the amount, the budget that was given to the project, which was nowhere near the scope, the initial scope of having 25 projects, meant that they had to limit their scope to 4. So this $31 million project becomes, instead of having, kind of communities all over the United States, limited to 4 locales. And in designing these locales, it's really seen as you're going to have green space in all of them. You need to be somewhere that's accessible to a city, because there's this, while it will be a self-supporting town, there's a sense that it won't support the number of jobs that you need. And there'll be readily available agricultural products, because it will be near farms and things like that as well. In designing the city, and if you look at the way there's this kind of circle of traffic as opposed to lines crisscrossing and going through, that one of the big, detriments of modern city life is the automobile, that cars are everywhere and they're challenging and they're dangerous and smelly and all of those things. So instead of having your cars going through the city, that they really designed the traffic flows so that it would circle the cities and not have these kinds of big thoroughfares and sections within the town itself. So the 3 towns that were identified was 2 of the 3 were Greenbelt, Maryland, which is just outside DC, and you can see how nicely laid out it is and how beautifully, situated each house is. It's very organized. And the other is Green Hills, Ohio. And Green Hills, Ohio is just outside of Cincinnati. The third of these spaces is Greendale, Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee, and we'll talk about that a bit in a second. And the 4th is Greenbrook, and it's outside of New Brunswick, New Jersey. There's a lot of kind of push to really ensure that this is going to happen. And Tugwell writes this huge full-page editorial in the Capital Times. It's a special edition, writes special article for Capital Times, and he says, through all of the difference work of the Resettlement Administration, 10,000 families are aided. And he really goes through in this article talking about all of the stuff that he's going to be doing in the North Woods in terms of buying back old lumber yards and in terms of correcting agricultural soil that had gone bad and stuff like that. But he also is talking here a lot about Greenbelt Town. And he says in this article, one of such Greenbelt towns called Greendale is being built by the Resettlement Administration in the countryside, 2 miles southwest of the city limits of Milwaukee. Greendale provides homes for 750 families from factories and offices of greater Milwaukee. These families will be within easy commuting distance of their work, as Greendale is only 7 miles from downtown Milwaukee, 4 miles from West Dallas, and 5 from Cudahy and South Milwaukee. Such a town as Greendale is the subdivision of the future. Properly speaking, it is not really a subdivision. It will be a town in and of itself, dependent on Milwaukee, but with stores, schools, churches, and local government and a civic life of its own. Town planners and architects have worked to bring together all the elements of the community in the most orderly and economical manner possible. Inner city traffic will be routed around, not through the town, and through the town. And within the town, traffic will be concentrated on a few streets. Large spaces will be left for recreation. Utilities are being laid down so that maintenance costs will be low. In these and 100 other ways, Greendale will be a contrast to the potential slums which have been built up in many of our great urban centers. There's this real sense that if we could plan a city, that if you could build a city with this kind of intent, that you would not get the same sorts of challenges that you see in other places in terms of overcrowding, in terms of not having space for gathering, in terms of not having green space, that this would all be part of the architecture and design of a city like Greendale. So even within Milwaukee and Wisconsin, this is not without its criticism. And in the Milwaukee Sentinel, as the Resettlement Administration had been placed in Madison and then moves to Milwaukee, to the courthouse. And the Sentinel responds to this saying, that they shouldn't be in here. And they'd been given a rent. I think they'd been given a no rent situation in the courthouse. But they go on to really lay out the concern about the Resettlement Administration. And I like how he calls it, remember, his name is Rexford Tugwell. He calls it a Tugwellian laboratory. There is nothing permanent about the RA. It is engaged in a highly experimental work. Its success is far from assured. Its objectives are of doubtful value. It is simply another New Deal scheme devised particularly to keep Mr. Tugwell busy and to provide him with further opportunity to advance his experiments in remaking America. So clearly there's a big sense of pushback, and not just within Milwaukee. This actually, in the Wisconsin, Greendale is built, people move in, and it's occupied. This really comes to a head in New Jersey. And the battle there, and you can see it's the Battle of Franklin Township, is launched as, that's not what I wanted to do. Get this back up again. The battle in Franklin Township, as the Resettlement Administration starts trying to buy land, they get a wind of what's going down, and they're nervous about how the tax ramifications of the Resettlement Administration of a Greenbelt town near them. What does it mean to have potential low-income housing, as it were, as some of it is designed to be, or in an area that had previously, Franklin Township had been predominantly affluent, and there's this concern about what's going to come into our town. So the town itself, that's next to the town where Greenbrook is set to open, starts a process of saying, not in our town, not in my backyard, and they launch a legal campaign against this. They actually hired Dean Acheson, future Secretary of State in the Truman administration, and he's the lead counsel for this. And he takes this through the federal court system, and basically says that the Resettlement Administration is unconstitutional because it overstepped its bounds of the executive branch, and planning of this sort for housing and town, community development, that does not belong in the executive branch of the federal government. That should either be in a state government issue or a local municipality issue, but not something that the national government is stepping into, and that it's not a federal issue. The federal court sided with the township. Now, interestingly, by the time this agreement happens, by the time the court says, yep, Resettlement Administration, you've overstepped your bounds, many of the people who were protesting, who were against the town of Greenbrook, next to Franklin Township, had withdrawn their objections. They'd seen Tugwell had answered many of their concerns. They really felt like this wasn't such a terrible project. But it comes up in federal court that it's decided against the Resettlement Administration, and they're nervous. They don't want to take this up to the next level of court because there have already been some losses, some New Deal losses in the Supreme Court. And beyond that, they don't want to lose the strides that they've already taken in terms of building the 3 towns in Ohio and Maryland and Wisconsin. So they say, fine, we'll adhere to the federal court's decision. We will not continue our process in New Jersey. And they stop. And at this point, Tugwell resigns his position. The Resettlement Administration is changed over from the Resettlement Administration to the Farm Security Administration, which is in operation until the mid-40s. And you kind of lose that sense of momentum of having a big national plan for what city planning and housing policy would look like during the New Deal in this way. We're going to learn so much more about this in our program on September 5th at 1 o'clock at Greendale. There will be social distancing and all of those sorts of protocols in place. This is an opportunity for you to come check out this incredibly interesting history and to see some of to get a sense of the architecture and what was designed within this community by the Resettlement Administration. So we're excited to invite you to this. Please join us for this fabulous tour on September 5th at 1 o'clock. As always, thank you to my very special supporter, Robin Cohen. You can learn more about Jewish Museum Milwaukee and book your tours, your tickets to tour historic Greendale at jewishmuseummilwaukee.org. You can also come visit us in person. Brother, Can You Spare a Dime is open through September 5th, and we'd be delighted to see you there. Thanks so much, and we hope you will see you soon, either in person or virtually.